Here at DyatlovPass.com is a resource that has to be probably the best Dyatlov Pass resource on the internet. I guess the name of it is 1079. That's the number of the mountain they were trying to get to. It's entitled Dyatlov Group, and the author begins. The Dyatlov Pass incident is the mysterious deaths of 9 ski hikers in the northern Ural Mountains on February the 2nd, 1959. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women. Most were students or graduates of Ural Polytech. The goal of the 14-day expedition was to reach Otorten, a mountain 20 kilometers north of the site of the incident. That's about 12 miles. This route at that season was estimated as Category 3, the most difficult. All members were experienced in long ski tours and mountain expeditions. The group arrived by train at Ivdel, a city at the center of the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast on the 25th of January. They then took a truck to Vizay, the last inhabited settlement this far north. They started their march towards Otorten from Vizay on January 27. The next day, one of the members, Yuri Udin, was forced to go back because of illness. He's the only survivor. Diaries and cameras found around the last camp made it possible to track the group's route up to the day preceding the incident. The hike started out fairly late on February 1st, and they only traveled 4 kilometers, about 2.5 miles that day. Excess gear and food was stored on a platform in a forest called Iabez, or Camp Base. The camp was set up around 5 p.m. on a slope of Kholat Syakhi, just 10 miles from Mount Otorten. They had their dinner around 6 to 7 p.m., and 1 or 2 members of the group went outside to relieve themselves, presumably Semyon and Nikolai, since they were found to have been better dressed than the others. Then something went catastrophically wrong. It had been agreed beforehand that Dyatlov would send a telegram to their sports club as soon as the group returned to Vizay. It was expected that this would happen no later than February 12th. But Dyatlov had told Udin that he expected to be longer, so when the date passed and no message had been received, there was no immediate reaction. Delays of a few days were common in such expeditions. Only after the relatives of the travelers demanded a rescue operation did the head of the institute send the first rescue groups, consisting of volunteer students, volunteer teachers, on February the 20th. Later, the army and police forces became involved, with planes and helicopters being ordered to join the rescue operation. On the 26th of February, the searchers found the abandoned and badly damaged tent on Kholat Syakhi. I guess that's the side of the mountain there. Mihal Sheravin, the student who found the tent, said, quote, "The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind." Investigators said the tent had been cut open from the inside, and that skiers had fled in socks or barefoot. A chain of 8 or 9 sets of footprints left by several people who were wearing socks or a single shoe or barefoot could be followed and led down towards the edge of the nearby woods on the opposite side of the pass, about a click and a half northeast. But after half a click, they were covered with snow. The tracks, that is. At the forest edge, under a large old cedar, the search party found the remains of a fire, along with the first 2 bodies. Excuse me. Those of Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Durashenko, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. The branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters high. I guess they're trying to collect firewood, maybe? The medical examiner recorded livor mortis on the back. But Krivonashenko was found facing up. This indicated that someone had moved them after their death. On February 27, between the cedar and the tent, the searchers found Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the expedition. Just a young man himself. And Zinaida Kolmogorova. And 6 days later, on March 5th, Rustin Slobodin. The three seemed to have died in poses suggested they were attempting to return to the tent. A medical examination found no injuries which might have led to their deaths. And it was concluded they died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was not thought to have been a fatal wound. A legal inquest started immediately after the discovery of the first 5 bodies. Searching for the remaining 4 hikers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on the 5th of May, under 4 meters of snow, in a ravine 50 meters farther into the woods from the cedar tree. Thank you, Chili Bean, for the super chat. The super chat says, from Elizabeth, so very happy to see you again, and you as well, Elizabeth and her son. Thank you, Chili Bean. These 4 were better dressed than the others, the last ones found. And there were signs that those who had died first had apparently relinquished their clothes to the others. Thibodeau Brignol was wearing Dubonina's fur coat and hat. Dubonina's was wearing a brown sweater that tested radioactive, and was most probably Krivoshenko's. Zolotaryov had Doroshenko's hat. Kolevatov was wearing Doroshenko's overalls, the waistband of his sweater and lower part of his ski trousers, testing radioactive. An examination of the 4 bodies found in May changed the course of the investigation. 3 of them had fatal injuries. The body of Thibault had major skull damage, and both Dubina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures. According to Dr. Boris Vorozdeny, the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high. He compared it to the force of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. Dubonina was found to be missing her tongue. The group clearly realized their threats and did everything they could to preserve themselves. They had managed to dig out a den in the snow, laid it down with branches in an effort to keep themselves warm. But things were about to get even more bizarre. Bodies were actually found a few feet from their improvised shelter, in the deep part of the ravine, in an area only 4 meters square. Some of the clothes had been taken from the bodies underneath the cedar tree and were placed on the cedar branches, but apparently they were not used. The first person to become bothered by the delay of the hikers' return was Kolevatov's eldest sister, Rima Sergeyevna Kolevatova. She started asking questions, urging authorities to start a rescue operation. And on February 26th, a telegram was sent to Nikita Khrushchev, signed by Nina Sergeyevna Anisimova, another sister of Alexander. The telegram was shown in the Kremlin on February 27th. Rima's testimony, published below, clearly shows her knowledge that a telegram from the hikers sent from Vizay was expected February 12, with a notice about their arrival in Sverdlovsk. Nina Anisimova, one of the 4 Kolevatov sisters, in her despair, made up an earlier date of the group's expected return date to make the facts more ominous. The telegram may have escalated the search and rescue operation to the highest circles. Special report dated February 28th, addressed to the Minister of Internal Affairs, is published below. Igor Dyatlov didn't file all the required documents for the trip, notably the map or the route. The organization of the rescue expedition became hindered by this fact. The necessary information began to be feverishly reconstructed from the stories of people who heard about the plans of the Dyatlov group. The problem with the missing map was resolved by another member of the Polytech Sport Club, Ignatia Folkish-Ryagin, a friend of the Kolevatov family, who discussed extensively with Alexander the forthcoming trek in mid-January. Ryagin recalled the route of the group from memory, and on February 19th, Rima handed over the map to Colonel Georgy Orakov, a tactics instructor from the UPI military department, who led the search for the group in those February days and subsequently put a lot of effort into clarifying the history of the Dyatlov group. Initially, the officials were hesitant to sound an alarm about hiker disappearances near Mount Otorten when they missed the day they were supposed to call. From the Vizay group that was mentioned in the Dyatlov diary on January 24, returned in the middle of February. They reported a heavy snowstorm in the area. In light of this information, it was assumed that the hikers were spending these extra days somewhere in the safety near Dyatlov Pass. It says here, in the safety. I guess it means somewhere safely. Risking lives to make extra miles to get back at the due date made no sense. Head of the UPI Sports Club, Lev Smenyanovich Gordo, even lied about receiving a telegram from Dyatlov about the delay to calm parents of Dobrina and Kolevatov. He assumed that in a few days, the group of Igor Dyatlov is going to make it anyway. Sounds like this was translated directly from the Russian. Relatives eventually forced them to organize a search party by complaining to the local head of the Communist Party. Negative publicity was unwanted, and actions had to be taken. The head of the military department of UPI, Colonel Okotyakov, took charge of the search and rescue party. Many students volunteered to search for their lost comrades. Several rescue parties were sent to the region on February 21st. One of these groups was headed by Blinov, and another by Sogreen. Both groups just returned from their trips with knowledge about conditions of the region. Another group was in the area and joined the search effort. Planes took off from the nearby airport to search for the group from the air. On February 22nd, several prison guards and another 7 officers of the police joined in the search of Dyatlov Pass. Another 3 groups were formed in the UPI from student volunteers. On February 23, another group was dropped near Mount Otorten, the final destination for Dyatlov. The next day, they reached the mountain and came to the conclusion the hikers never made it this far. Students did not find any records or flags or anything else that would indicate a recent visit of the group.